I am here as ever with Anne Lord Jackson. Hello, Anne.
Hello, great to be here too.
Right now, we could come into what you do as a living, but we have been working through because of what you do. The five senses is where we thought we'd start, as I was taught it in school. The five senses, we're going to work through those and then interpret that into proper speak, not Andy B version, and then we unpick it a little bit. So we have looked at hearing and we've looked at sight. What are we going to be looking at today? And then, if I say the word smell, what's that in proper speak?
Yeah, so we have looked at auditory processing, visual processing, and we're now on to olfactory processing. But yeah, it's the sense of smell and what it does for us. And yeah.
I'm quite liking this series that we're doing, because this is, for me at least, it's my really rudimentary basic core understanding of how our senses help us to interact with people in the real world around us. When I was at school, we would talk about the five senses. We've already touched two of those. It's much more than just hearing or just seeing. There's a whole lot of the stuff, hence audio processing. The word processing is the clue there.
Mm.
So smell, give us a bit of an overview about, well, let's start here. Why is smell important?
Oh, loads of reasons. It's one of those really strange ones because it's just like, why have we been given a nose? Like, it would be so much nicer perhaps if there was something else that looked a bit different, and people are quite sensitive about what their nose looks like, how big it is, the structure and the form. And it's another one of those bizarre things like the shape of the ear, why we have this nose the way that it is and where it's positioned. And but the importance of it is it gives us so many things that we don't actually normally think about. It's one of those automatic, underlying baseline things that help us recognize people. We don't realize most of the time just how important the smell recognition is, because each of us, one of the lovely things, I always talk about sensory processing and sensory thumbprints, finding each individual person's unique sensory thumbprint, which is how we assess and find all of those senses, how they are working for that individual person. But the smell has its own thumbprint. It has its own fingerprint, that every single person has a different smell fingerprint, a different smell thumbprint. So, like a mother can tell if she was to go into a room and if she was blindfolded, she would be able to tell which of her children it is. Or if it was in a nursery, you could kind of go around. If there weren't any other senses being impacted with sights and sounds and all kinds of things, you would actually be able to identify your own individual, your own loved one, your own husband, your own wife, your own child. We each have our own individual, smell.
Wow.
So that's really fascinating to begin with. So just on that really basic level, but of course we don't go around smelling people. Well, not normally
Yeah,
anyway.
probably shouldn't.
No. And that's why it's hard when we use deodorants and things like that. It impacts a base level of communication and of connection. And then we associate, if somebody has a certain perfume, we associate that perfume with them, which then gets a bit disconcerting if they then change that perfume. But it involves, smell involves feeding and how we enjoy food or not. It gives us our bearings. It gives us so much pleasure or warns us of danger. It's very, very important sense.
I watched a documentary. Maybe you can correct me. I may have misremembered, but in the documentary, they showed people who were meeting each other for the first time. So it was kind of classic, normal situation. You walk into a room. Oh, hi, how are you doing? My name is Andy. You're Anne. Oh, great. Yeah. Quick handshake and off you go. But what they discovered was lots of people shake hands and then sniff their hand subconsciously immediately afterwards, or very quickly afterwards. I don't know if you've ever known anything about that. I was fascinated.
No, but that would fit in exactly the same thing. It's that recognition of who you are. Goodness, I never knew that. That totally ties in. I love it when you say things and it just reinforces what I've just said. It's like, oh, thank you, Andy. I'm not yet. I'm not just
I
out here because I can.
I just watched it and then I thought, no, that's not real. That's got to be fake. And you realize this is actually scientists who are doing proper observational studies. But
Right.
yeah, people were shaking hands, hi, how you doing? And not straight away sniffing, but then they'd go away and it's almost involuntary at a very, very distant subconscious level
Ah,
that they then sort of wipe their nose as they go to scratch their eye or something. And it was very interesting. So I just wondered if you'd seen that or heard of that, but you're saying it basically it probably fits anyway.
It totally fits. It totally fits. It's that recognition, but it's totally subconscious. We are not consciously thinking about, oh, what does this person smell like? Do I like it? Do I recognize this? Does it associate with anything that I've experienced in the past? We're not doing that at a high cognitive level, higher in the cortex. It's much lower brain processing.
And of course, recently, if you're doing that, you're going to smell that the alcohol hand wash. It's probably all you're going to smell now from shaking hands. I know before I walked into the room, wash my hands. As I finished, wash my hands. It's the sort of post-COVID thing is still there, isn't it, with the hand washing?
Mm. It is, and that smell is going to trigger an awful lot of negative associations and memories for people. Mm.
Okay, so that's sort of the what is the smell. The one thing I do know about smell is it is an incredible trigger for memories that are hidden a long time ago. So when I had CBT PTSD, so cognitive behavioral therapy, post-traumatic stress disorder, when I had that therapy and I was struggling to remember, one of the things the therapist did was, okay, what can you smell in that memory that I had a bit of a glimpse of? What can you smell? And all of a sudden, it really is like one of those films where all these images start flashing and you've got this storytelling. It was like that every time. And I was quite shocked. She should find it quite funny that just how powerful that having a small memory and then attaching a smell to that was insane in a good way.
Yeah, phenomenal. It is the only sense of our 7/8 senses that doesn't go through the thalamus. Most of our body senses come up through the brainstem, which is a really powerful integration space at the very bottom of the brain. And then they go to the thalamus, which is in the middle of the brain, which is like the main train station, or like Heathrow Airport, if you're British. It's a real hub for processing sensory information, which then fires out the information and collates it and does all kinds of things with it. Smell doesn't go that route. So as it comes in and goes up to the olfactory bulb at the top of our nose and then gets turned into electric circuits and then gets passed on from there to the temporal lobe, which is another part of the brain that is mainly the one for processing that smell, there are direct links into the limbic system in the middle of your brain, which is where the memories are stored. So absolutely, that is why when you do get a smell, it's straight in there. It's not processed. It's not kind of like modulated. It's not dampened down. It is, the smell just goes in and woof, goes straight to the emotional receptors, the emotional interpreters inside your brain, rather. The olfactory bulb are your receptors, the limbic system does the interpretation, and along that connects really closely to those memories and visual memories, and then goes to the temporal lobe to get connected with words and other things that go along with it.
Mm.
So it's a very, very, very powerful sense.
So as opposed to other senses where effectively your body, your brain, some part of it is filtering the sight, the sound, that what you're hearing. Actually, when it's a smell, it's the unfiltered, the no makeup version. It just smacks straight. Sort of, I guess it just attaches to the memory, kind of.
Yeah. It's much more direct, and that's where we try and use smell. Smells hard to treat in that way. As a therapist, we're always looking for how we can change to make the systems work better. Smell. There was a child this morning that I was working with who has no smell recognition whatsoever. So for the likes of if your toast goes on fire, you've got smoke. We have an internal detector that we don't like certain smells because it's not right. If your toilet's blocked, there are certain smells you just think, oh, I have to act on that. There are certain smells that are definitely designed to provoke us to action, to do something, to protect ourselves, or to actually act on clearing that blockage. So you lose all of that when you don't have your sense of smell. And for this person also, food had no appeal whatsoever. It's just because taste and smell are so intimately linked that Yeah, it's the desire to want to eat, the whole social side of eating, all of that disappears as well. So it's protection, it's social, it's connecting, yeah, with other people on a more intimate, just emotional level. All of that disappears, and they have to compensate in different ways. So you've got those who are overreactive, those who are underreactive, and those who might smell a smell, but actually they can't tell where that smell's coming from. They can smell it's something, but they can't even tell that it's a bad smell, or if they think it is a bad smell, they can't see if it's the smoke from burnt toast, or if it's outside something's going on, or if it's the diesel. We've got an Aga in our house. Actually, just think about this. We've got an Aga in our house, and there's certain the way that the wind blows on certain times makes the diesel smell come back into the kitchen, and that's not pleasant at all. It's just a really old one. But so for them, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference between if something was a burnt smell or if it was a diesel smell, and that's just confusing
Hmm.
because you know something's up, but you don't know what. And there's nothing visually to tell you, okay, you might have a bit of smoke if it's coming out the toaster, but you might have smoke coming from elsewhere or the smell of something burning, but you can't actually see it, or you really have to pay attention to go and try and find where might there be something that is burning.
Um, Two things on that one. One, I remember once I smelt electrical smoke from a dishwasher that just literally just caught fire. I smelt that and was running before I even knew what the problem was, because I immediately thought, well, that's not smoke, that's electrical smoke, because you can smell plastics and all sorts of stuff. So I was running like heck for for the fuse board to kill the power in the house, because I knew exactly that's an electrical fire. I don't care where it is, it doesn't actually matter. The first thing is get the power off before we have a problem. So I
Mm.
ran to the fuse box and knocked the thing off. I suppose potentially risky if I did that. I could have got electrocuted, I guess. But do you know what? I hit it so hard I didn't really care,
Mm.
because let's just cut the problem out. But of course, if I didn't know the difference between a piece of toast burning and the dishwasher catching on fire, which I was literally 10 foot away, I would not have known it. Now I heard it, but I smelt it first, and the smell is what got me running and shouting, "Get out of the way!"
Yeah.
And the whole house was in turmoil because I was screaming through the house just from the smell, and it triggered a physical action in
Mhm.
response without me even contemplating what was going on.
Yeah. And that is the power of smell, and that is the speed at which we process smell without there comes a point that yeah it flicks up, I've got to act, and how am I going to do it? I need to go to the switchboard. So that was a conscious effort that you thought, I need to go to the fuse box. I need to deal with that. But that was that processing. You smelt it, your brain knew it exactly intimately within a second, and it's just like, I have to go, and you were able to go.
The bizarre thing was, I also saw a picture of the fuse board as I was running. In my mind, I had a picture of where it was and which way the thing flapped down, and I'd only looked at it maybe once or twice, but it was very bizarre. It was very almost surreal. But
Mm.
smell, picture, running, and I knew exactly where I needed to go on the fuse board, and it wasn't a surprise. It was but I mean, that is what we're talking about. That this is the power of smell, because it's not going to be filtered out by memory. It's not going to be filtered out by any of these normal things of where is the fuse board in the house, where's the stopcock, we got a leak. I've had that and had to find a stopcock. It's not as dangerous.
Mm.
Good, but it's not as dangerous as electrical fire. So my speed of actually, where is it? We can't remember. We've forgotten. Where is it? I don't know.
Yeah.
And eventually we found it, but I had a picture of where it was, and I ran.
Yeah, yeah. And that's where some of the people that I work with, we do have that problem because they are associating things like bathroom soap, and they won't go into certain bathrooms. Not necessarily because it's a fear or a danger, but the actual smell of it is so off-putting that they don't want to go near it. They won't go down certain supermarket aisles. They won't wear things that have been washed with a certain washing powder or washing liquid. It's those things that just get in the way of life, and people don't realize. And it's like, well, stop being stupid. Often is what they are told. Just put it on. It's only been washed, kind of thing. If there's not the recognition of how how sensitive we are to smell, and an acceptance that that's okay, because there's not a lot we can do to change it There are certain things that we can do to help, but we just accommodate our smell preferences for most of the time to stay in our best sensory health.
Another thing that came to my mind was the issue of eating, because if you're in a house and someone's cooking the dinner, the smell starts to move through the house, and oh, it's coming towards dinner time. You might look at your watch and think, okay, 5 o'clock, another hour or so, the slow cooker will be done, and it's dinner time. And already your mouth's starting to salivate, your stomach starts to gurgle because, okay, give me the food, and all of that is going on irrespective of our thought process. It's an autonomic response, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
But if you've got a misconnected that's a bad smell because of a brain trauma, or if you've got, oh, that's a smell that I really hate, or you can't smell it, or you just don't know what that smell is, all of a sudden, even some of the physiological stuff, like your stomach preparing itself for food, your mouth getting salivated so you can add moisture and then swallow it, all of that stuff isn't going to be happening, is it?
No, no. It's a profound, it has a profound impact for being such a apparently little experience.
But huge.
Huge.
It's like smelling the flowers. My granddad had, was it polyps or something? And then he could never smell.
Oh,
So it's amazing what he could tolerate. And it took me a long time to think, how is he not bothered by that? That thing I'm going to be throwing up in a second. Yep, all good. Yeah, it's fine.
yeah.
Because he couldn't smell it. Therefore, it wasn't such an issue.
Mm-hmm. And there's always a positive somewhere along the line,
Yes.
and that being one of them. But I think it's lovely when we do focus on the sensory health aspect of it. It's like, let's feed our sense of smell with the things that are beautiful, and not diminish how important and how nourishing it is to have lovely smells. I live on the island of Jersey, so for me, going down the beach, and I love seaweed. I know, of all things, not when it's really potent, and there are certain seasons where it's just like, woo, that's quite something. But there's something. It's just a lovely thing for me to be able to smell seaweed, cut grass. It's just so refreshing. Coffee, all the things when you're selling a house. Using those, you break your bread,
Yep.
you put the coffee on, those warm, associations that come with certain smells. There's a lovely thing to be able to introduce those things into everyday life to help you feel better.
I seem to remember a supermarket that pumped the smell of bread being made to the front of the store. So as soon as you walked into the shop, you had fresh bread being literally blown over you to make you hungry to buy more.
That's perfect psychology. It's I know there's a funny thing between just honoring and it's where does it become manipulation? So it's like, well, let's leave that to anybody else's conscience. Everyone will draw their line in the same in that way. But yeah, appreciating the senses. I think they knew they were onto something there, because that's exactly what it would do. And that's, however, for certain smells, it will be, there are general smells that we talk about, and they will do that. And then there are others that we have to watch, because smell is so pervasive that if we are using it, so for example, like my boy this morning, who doesn't have good smell recognition at all, or registration, which is the first part. You've got to register you're smelling something, because that before you can then discern what it is you're actually smelling. So we need to get his registration up that there are things. So we are dosing bits of handkerchief. He's quite willing to work along with this. So dosing bits of handkerchief with more intense smells, some aromatherapy drops, some other things, we'll be spraying it. But it has to be done in a room that is not going to impact other people, because smell is so pervasive, and people can have really negative effects and can cause headaches. Perfumes, aftershaves, lots of those smelly things, those plugins can all cause headaches for people too. So if there is any element of smell, then to make sure that it is contained as much as possible, so that you don't impact other people too much.
As I guess a former asthmatic, those plug-in things. If someone's got one of those, I'm out of the house. I can't breathe. My lips swell up. I think 3 of our kids have now been told by doctors and nurses they've got perfume allergies. So we have to be very, very careful. So like Jo in particular, if she smells like in some of the people she works with, they wear a lot of perfume, and she has to leave the room because she's got an instant headache. She can't breathe. She's coughing. Her eyes are watering. This isn't, a mental response. This is a physical. I can't cope with that.
Mm.
I have a tiny bit more tolerance, but not much, because it's just one of those things that if I walk through a cloud of vape, I'm choking.
Mm.
Someone's just vaped. I wish that could be made illegal. I would rather people go back to smoking, to be honest. It causes less issues with my breathing. I
Right.
can actually breathe afterwards. Whereas there's something in a vape, I think it's probably the scent in it, which my literally, I can't breathe, I can't swallow as I walk through that cloud or even anywhere near it.
Yeah. And the thing, if there's anybody in the vaping industry listening, the most power will come from the fact that it is that proprioceptive, tactile oxygenation that's going on. The taste, yes, is an added something, taste stroke smell. But if they could just cut out all of that, so you literally are just sucking in air. That blowing and that sucking is so regulating. And that's why people smoked in the first place. Well, apart from the fact that nicotine has its impact, and that's why vapes have taken over, because actually people are off the nicotine addiction, but they still need that blowing and that sucking. And that's exactly what just doing it without the other stuff will be still powerful and effective. Because what we need is that eye, mouth, hand breathing in and out. That is the most regulating of activities, which I do lots with my kind of people, whether it be blowing tennis balls across a pool of water, sucking things, like lifting things up with straws and blowing them. All of that is so good for the body. So actually, I would love a company to do air vapes, for want of a better word. I don't know if that exists. I've never seen any, but
I
if
wish it
anybody's
did.
listening, you heard it here, and that's okay. You can always pay me a commission at some point. But yeah, air vapes is where we need to go.
I would love to see vapes completely eradicated from the face of the planet. They are horrid to me. I can't breathe. Right. Another idea that came back from your talking about smell, because I want to move on to the therapy part of what it is that you do. But I remember going, one of my first jobs after school, I went up to Scotland and we were putting in pipes to get methane out of household waste sites. So the household waste sat there for 25, 30 years. Then a company who I was working for come along, drill a massive thick pipe into the ground so that the methane can get out. They actually capture the methane and they burn it. But the smell is something that I'm not sure I'm ever going to not smell. We're digging through 20-year-old house waste. If you think your bin is bad, it's nothing, honestly. If you put your bin in the ground for 20 years, that's what I did for about 3 or 4 weeks, drilling holes. And the guy I was with, who was used to it, was laughing as I was bent double, retching and trying to be sick. And
Right.
within a few days, I got used to it. I never stopped smelling it. However, the smell became less of an issue. So, in a sense, I suppose that was a form of immersive therapy, for want of a better word, standing on a 25-year-old dump, pulling out stuff from, 10 meters below the ground, horrid, wretched stuff. But I got used to the smell.
Mm.
So that effectively not a good one, but a version of sort of immersive therapy.
Yeah. It's where our cells habituate. That's what we would say in technical terms. It's that habituation that actually we, first time we smell something, goodness me, we are really alerted to something, and the brain recognizes it as new and has a response. That's that
I
processing.
had a
You
response.
Yeah, had a response, yeah, for sure. And then over time, there is a sense of actually, oh, I've smelt that before. Um, I know it wasn't nice, but you would have those consequences for some time. But then again, the brain's the more and more it gets used to something, the more and more it habituates. So it's less intense. The impact is less. You basically get used to it, and that is what happens with lots of our senses. For seasickness, for smell stuff, for lots of things, and that's that immersive. That's one way of dealing with it. I normally rather a gentle approach rather than full on, cold turkey type. Right, this is what you've got to experience 24 hours a day, and then your brain will shut off because it does.
Yeah, 15 hours a day, 10-day weeks. it was ripe and pungent, shall we say. But interesting, the guy I was with who'd done it for a very, very long time, he said, stop looking at the stuff coming out of the ground, focus on the job, it'll get easier quicker. So I listened to him because I respected, what he did and whatever. And the more I focused on my job, the less the smell, the stench, and the ooze was an issue. It sort of became a lesser issue, which I guess in a very, very obscure way is sort of a form of therapy of distraction in order to get used to it.
Yeah, we take the cognitive when we are heightened. This is a really interesting process that when people go through my sensory super system, I'm causing them to think. I'm asking them to think cognitively about how they are processing their senses, because most of that processing is subconscious. It's not something that they tell themselves to process. I'm going to like this. I'm not going to like that. It's like it's all lower brain processing, but I'm asking them to use their cognitive, their thinking brain to pay attention to things. And all of a sudden, things that weren't an issue before, well, they just weren't drawn to their attention. Now that I have drawn them to their attention, we've actually got to treat it, whether it be helping them to take their attention elsewhere, or by actually getting those senses more integrated, because otherwise we live in a situation that you've just described, that actually you are heightened to the sensory input, and it's actually worse than what it was before, because now you're actually aware that this is an issue. So we then need to come back down. So we kind of like go up and recognize, and it's all like, oh my goodness, there's all this happening, and can I cope? And then it's just like, well, actually, yes, we then need to come back down the mountain to normalize, to integrate, to treat, to settle the nervous system so that it's much more able, we can function so much better in life.
Yes, you don't do the sink or swim method. I'd imagine any therapists.
Not there might be some. There might be some, especially if things have worked for them, then they tend to use the same treatment approach. I'm much more of a gentle let their inner drive pull them to what they're ready to yeah, that's my way. So that's how I would do most of my therapy.
Yes, if you've got an issue with smell, don't drill through Edinburgh's 25-year-old waste dump. Not recommended. But it might cure something. Okay, so let's move back onto the therapy stuff. You're saying it's harder to deal with a sense of smell because it works in a different way into the brain. What can somebody do if they have, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that's been completely misconstrued. I don't know, they smell a piece of chicken cooking, but they associate it with something really, really evil and bad because they had bad chicken one time. How might they go from smelling chicken, which is perfectly healthy, cooking in the pan, and wanting to be sick, to not and being okay with it?
There's loads of different ways in. I normally, have lots of different approaches to that. So we would take away, we'd work on anything that's cool, smells less than anything that's hot. So that's why when food is cooking, that's when it goes around the household and you can smell it. So we would start with chicken, looking like a chicken, but cold, so that the smell affect is a lot less. And then it's the talking. We want to get the brain engaged, thinking about it and dealing with those negative past associations, and slowly increasing the smell of that chicken so that it is tolerable. Pairing it with another smell. So you've got two things cooking at the same time, so that they start to get used to the smell of good chicken, but they might be cooking alongside with some beef of what they are happy to have. So that there's that way of doing it, talking it through all the time. And then on a completely different level, we would then look at the general arousal level in their nervous system. Because when you are heightened, when you're more alert, when you're more conscious of something happening that you don't want to happen or that you've been sick with in the past, we need to calm the system down so that it is not quite so receptive to the smells. So we would be looking at how we can go on the trampoline beforehand, how we can calm the body down, how we can do exercise, how we can just listen to music, use all the other senses to bring the body into a better place, so that when the smell hits, it's not fired up quite so quickly, which can happen also.
Eating outside? And a
Mm,
strong breeze. I mean, that'll moderate the smell, won't it?
as well. Yeah. Yeah. And give you other sensations to pay attention to, for your brain to pay attention to, not just the smell itself.
I suppose if you're overloading, no, that's not quite the right word. If you are using more of your senses more,
Mhm.
I don't know, because you've got the wind blowing on your face, so you can feel the wind, you've got the temperature, you can hear the trees rustling. If all these other senses are actually working at a good high level, not over level, but just working at a good level, the thing that you have a problem with, the smell of that piece of chicken cooking, it's going to be less of an issue because your brain can only process so much. So if you're making your brain work across the spectrum more,
Mm.
actually it's easier then. This is me trying to put into words what you're saying.
Mm.
How that sort of diminishes how much of the smell is how well your brain can't play with the smell sense so much because it's got to deal with everything else as well.
Yeah.
Is that really bad wording of it?
No, I think that's it. The smell's always going to get in there, but I think there is less capacity, although the brain is remarkable, there is less capacity to process, because it can only process a certain number of things at the same time. But
So have you had somebody you successfully worked through? Food is just in my head. I don't know why. Probably want breakfast. But have you had somebody who has had a real issue with smell? This makes me sick, and they are literally being sick. Have you ever worked with anybody and then help them to to get through that? And now the success story is that they're okay now.
yeah, because I have a 12-week stress-free mealtime program, because it's not generally, I get the words right, it's generally not just a smell issue. We do have the vision. So the people who are only eating beige food, they'll only eat 5 foods. They'll only eat McDonald's chips. They'll only eat those. Smell is a part of it, but it's typically more than just smell. So for me personally, I haven't worked with anybody that's just been smell. There's always been other things. But yeah, we totally get that from just eating 5 foods, just those really basic foods, to then having a much, much wider repertoire because of the process that we go through, overworking for 12 weeks.
That's really cool. I'm sure there are many parents who are thinking, how do I get my child to eat broccoli? How can I get him to eat a carrot? I know as parents, we used to take broccoli and blend it and then put it into mash. So the mash
Yeah.
was a sort of green tinge to it, but it's a way of getting broccoli into the food, cheating slightly to get the nutrients in. So there are things we can do, but I suppose in a sense as well, that particular one, which we did do, that's lowering the intensity of the broccoli because now it's mixed with mashed potato and some butter and some salt and some pepper. And all of a sudden the broccoli's there, but it's just very, very weak.
Yes, yeah, and that's exactly one of the ways in to increase tolerance, taste, smell, exactly that kind of thing.
But the 12-week thing that you talked about, I guess that's the point there because we can't just smell food. We have to see food, or we have to hear it cooking, or we can taste it, or we can touch it. Chicken feels different to beef, which feels different to, I don't know, sweet corn. They've got different textures. So that
Totally.
I guess that's part of the battle and why people like you can come along and say, well, it's not just the smell, it's these other things as well, and then work with people to help them to get past the thing, which is the smell, because part of the thing is it's not actually just the smell.
Yeah, and also to be able to sit still at the table to be able to eat anything in the first place.
Yeah.
It's just like, how much of that is the smell, or how much of that is their body, that actually they just can't, they can't sit still because of their vestibular proprioceptive processing that we will get onto after we've done the 5 senses.
Yes. Right. Thank you. I've liked the one on smell because I think for me, having worked on that household waste site, it's something
Mm.
I have heightened awareness of the issues around, having had, I suppose, therapeutic trials of just keep doing it until it's not a problem anymore, because you've got a job to do, which isn't necessarily the gentlest way, but I mean, it worked for me. I was, on my own in Scotland. I've just got to get on with the job or quit.
Mm.
And sometimes there is that part of you just have to find a way, and in having to find a way, you actually do get through it. What is it? Having a problem creates innovation, or there's a better phrase of that one. But yeah, okay, interesting. I'm enjoying this series because it's going through the real basic stuff and realizing it's not basics. And when you talk about how smell doesn't go in the same way as hearing or sight, immediately it's obvious to me, at least, why there are so many complications and why people can have so many layers of issues, like an onion that has to be peeled away. What's the
Mm.
real cause?
Yeah.
Smell might only be the trigger, but it's not necessarily the actual problem, which is specialists like you can then say, yeah, that's not the issue. Maybe look at this instead. Okay, thank you, Anne. We've got 2 more of the basic senses to work through, and then we'll get to the other senses, because if you were taught in school like I was, there's 5 senses. You weren't wrong, but they maybe missed out some extra bits and pieces. So we'll get onto those as well. And if you want to know more about Anne Laure Jackson, you can find out best pure247radio.org/ALJ, pure247radio.org/ALJ, and it will take you through to connect with Anne. And if your parents struggling with food issues with your children or your wife, husband, whatever, then maybe the 12-week course is something you can consider. Thank you, Anne. I'm really enjoying these. Really,
Yeah,
really.
I'm so glad.
Well, it's going back to basics in a way which is important with, I suppose, more up-to-date understanding of what else is going on, because science, helps us to learn more and more things, and then thinking, well, how can we do better? How can we help people? So yeah, it is good. How can we be more loving and compassionate to a society of people who are struggling, not just with their smell, but all sorts? Right. Thank you. I got very excited about this. It's good. Okay. Thank you, Anne. And I will see you again, God willing, next week.
See you next time.